Hello, Misfits. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it's our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs, with a specific focus on their misfit side, the specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you're new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. This week's Misfit Entrepreneur is Jothy Rosenberg. Jothy is a two-time cancer-surviving amputee, book author, and serial entrepreneur. Over the course of his 35-year career, Jothy has built 9 startup companies in fields as diverse as supercomputing and cybersecurity, and even a TV production company. With 2 exits of over $100 million, Jothy has shown how anyone can use their personal struggles to help them succeed at the highest levels. In fact, his latest book is called Think Like a Tech Founder, Anecdotes of an Incorrigible Entrepreneur. I love that title. And it shares the hard-won wisdom from an over 35-plus year career and entrepreneur journey distilled into essential lessons for founders and CEOs. Jothy's story of overcoming adversity to achieve just immeasurable, unbelievable success is not just inspiring, it's really a roadmap for anyone who wants to reach their true potential. And I'm excited to dig in on everything with him today. So Jothy, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
I'm ready. I'm excited to be here. And I didn't know I was a misfit before, but I'm excited to expose that.
Well, that is the dirty little secret of this show. Everybody is a misfit. And every entrepreneur is a misfit. That's what makes us unique. And that's what allows us to be successful in our different ways. And so the fun part that I have is figuring out what your specific misfit side is that you can share with the audience, right? So we'll dig into that as we go. But first, you've got just an incredible story. You've got an incredible background for almost being well, and for lack of a better term, and it's true, like kneecapped in your teenage years to overcoming all that adversity and building so many great companies and everything. So just take 5 minutes or so and tell us, how'd you get to where you're at?
Well, I was 16 and, as you said, faced with kind of the most horrible thing that you could deal with as a teenager, which is told I had cancer, I had to have my leg amputated in an emergency, and then what followed was everybody kept saying "can't" to me, like you can't ski again, you can't swim because you'll go in circles. Can't. It was ridiculous. And I was pretty much left up to myself to figure out what I could do. And I was a sports-oriented kid, and I wanted to do all these things. I was already at 16 a pretty good skier, and it was very important to me. But I got out there after I had healed up, and I tried to ski, and it was really hard with those pointy poles. They hadn't yet invented the kind that have the ski tips on them. And anyway, I did start to figure some stuff out, and then I was in college, and I got whacked again because it was in the bloodstream, and it had come back, and it had spread to my lung, and I had to have a lung removed. And so at that point, the doctor, who didn't know that, because chemotherapy was so new, he didn't know it was actually able to cure what had happened to me. And he said what was truthful at the time, that no one had ever survived what had happened to me. But my 19-year-old brain said, "You're going to die." And so I quit school, and I went to Alta, Utah, and became a ski bum. And I skied 100 days straight. Now I had those outriggers, which are the poles that have ski tips on them. And I had just 100 days where I skied every day to accomplish this. I just wanted, if I could do one thing before I was going to perish, I wanted to ski well. And I got to the point where I was a double black diamond skier, just period, not considering I was on one leg. And that made me feel fantastic. And so the thing that I started to feel was that first, you're really insecure from the disability and everything that has happened to you. You've been beaten over the head. But then as you start to ski better than two-leggers, that's what I call you guys, two-leggers, it was this feeling of exceptionalism, and and I discovered that was the key to me, and the two together, insecurity plus exceptionalism, just creates this drive to overcome the insecurity and feel more of the exceptionalism. And since then, I became a competitor in the annual Alcatraz Shark Fest swim, which I've done 29 years in a row. I started because somebody said, you can't bike from Boston to New York. So I got a bike and I've done it 4 times. And all of that was just a prelude to becoming an entrepreneur. So, the snow melted and I had to do something. So I finished college and then I went to grad school and I got a PhD in computer science. I did that as I was a professor for 5 years, but I then got the itch. I was working on something as a research project that was awesome. And I wanted to go see if I could turn that into a company. Again, people said, oh, that's really hard to do. So that was my, my trigger words. Oh, that's really hard to do. I would want to go do it. And then I started building companies. So that's the backstory.
Is a pretty incredible story, right? And it would have been a lot easier just to say, yeah, you're right, I can't do these things, and just, kind of go into your shell and live life, with these things, and in some ways, just be a true victim, right? In a way, and live that way. But I just love the fact that, and I think this is a great thing for entrepreneurs too, is like the things that we are told we shouldn't do, we should do. It's like do the opposite, right? Prove yourself that you can do it. I emphasize a lot because I've been I competed skiing as a kid. I was, it's one of my passions and loves. I don't get to do it as much as I used to, but anytime I can get in the backcountry and ski and do that stuff each year, I love to do it. I couldn't imagine what it would be like if I couldn't, right? I think only people that have done that or, understand what that's like, not being able to maybe do that. But you're right. It drives you even more to have that ability to do those things. So, as I think about this, this journey, and obviously we're going to get a lot into the entrepreneur side, but what would you say, I guess, and this is what pops in my mind, what is the number one thing your experience has taught you about life?
Well, it sort of became my mantra, and ultimately I went and got the U.S. government trademark on the saying, "Who says I can't?" And that's not a question at the end, question mark. It's an exclamation point. It's "Who says I can't?" And I gave the TED talk that's got that name and describe what I think drives somebody that goes through this. And by the way, you made the connection already between entrepreneurs and someone who's fighting the limitations of a disability. They're similar. I don't want anyone to think I'm comparing. I'm saying that people who are entrepreneurs have a disability. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the drive and the motivation is similar. The "who says I can't" is the answer to your question, and it really means don't accept any limitations. In the simplest sense, that's what it means. But it's something that is so easy for other people to identify with. And I, I'm not wearing a shirt that has it right now. I usually, try to, but it's when people see it on your hat or on your shirt, they ask what it is. Then you get a chance to sort of spread the word. And I've written a book called "Who Says I Can't?" And now I've written a children's book, which is trying to convey to children in the ages of 4 to 9 why they should not assume that just because something's hard that they can't do it. And when the kids read this book or it's read to them, they start going around the house and if mom or dad says can't, they nail them for it. They say, no, you can't say can't.
Well, and that's true too. What's one of the first words that a kid learns? No, right? And we're all guilty of it. I'm a parent and I say no to my kid. But one of the things that I think is, really important for us all is to understand that when we say I can't or we say no, it cuts everything off right then and there. It's a debilitating set of words. Your brain doesn't think further after that. But instead of saying I can't or just saying no, if you change it and you say, how can I? That activates the creative side of the brain to start thinking about the possibility of how it could be happening, how it could come to fruition. And so that's one thing that, I've tried to do, unless it's something that's truly like a no, like with my daughter, but it's not that it can't be done. It's how can it be done. Right. And it's funny, you go back to like Star Wars, right? There is no try, only do. And it's true. Like you either do or you don't. Right. And so most people, it's easy just to don't, because the do is the hard part. And so, but the way you get to doing is by asking how. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I was trying to convey that even in this children's book, because there's this human boy that's walking around this trail with a bunch of animals, and each one has some physical limitation. The giraffe has really short legs and keeps saying, I can't reach the leaves in the tree. But what, if you look at the situation, you go, well, yeah, that's true. Except that Alex says, well, now wait, I remember stilts. I'm going to make you stilts. And he makes some really big stilts. And suddenly the giraffe is reaching leaves taller than his dad can. And so it's sort of, and what Alex does is he just gives an idea, and then the animal has to work at it, because you don't just walk on stilts just fine the first time you try. And so they have to work at it, which is a good message, but they can overcome, adapt, whatever the correct, word is for
right.
The thing that they thought they can't do. And you're right. It's well, how can I?
Yeah. And so this goes to mindset, right? Because that's the underpinning of everything. What you believe, what you think drives everything. And I said for years, your thoughts, really beliefs, right, lead to your emotions lead to your thoughts lead to your actions lead to your results in the end. But if you take out everything in the middle, it's your beliefs end up with your results. And so for you, like, I'm curious too, because I have to imagine there was a lot of self-doubt in the beginning with everything. And then focus on like the challenge of life that would, be coming your way after this, right? Especially if you were like a pro level skier and everything and had this happen to you, right? So how did you learn to overcome the self-doubt and the challenges of life, to lead to a truly extraordinarily one? Because we still, no matter what state we're in, have self-doubt and things like that, right? So how do you attack that when that comes up in your life?
I would say, first of all, that I would set modest goals. And for example, the very first thing, once I was able to sort of move around, was, okay, they don't make a prosthetic right away, so you're on crutches, and the dog needed to go for a walk every day. And so I said, well, let me start being the one that does that. And lo and behold, my arms got stronger. I could go further. I could, go up hills. And it's like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. And then I would look at something else and set some modest goals. And I for example, when I said to my parents, the amputation was in January, and in March, and we lived in Michigan, and in March I said, I want you to take me out skiing. And I wasn't really fully even healed. And like I said before, I had to use pointy poles. And as you know, because you're a skier, Dave, we say in skiing that you steer with your big toe, which means that if you only have a left foot, then, and your big toe is on the right-hand side of your left foot, then you're going to make a right turn, which is going to seem natural. But your left turn, well, we never steer with our little toe. And so that turn is really clumsy. And so true to that, when I would get up and I would start to go, I would have a really smooth turn to the right. But then I would try to turn to the left, bang, fall. And it was like turn, fall, turn, fall, turn, fall, all the way down the hill. And my parents thought, oh my God, this was a horrible idea. He's going to be absolutely humiliated. And when they said, how do you think it went? And I said, yes. And they said, we don't understand. I said, all this is going to take is hard work. I can learn to turn, to steer with my little toe. And so that, we're not afraid of hard work. So that's not a barrier. It's just a matter of time. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that there's this transference that goes on. So once I really felt good about skiing, then that gave me a solid foundation of success that when I went into something new, and yeah, I'm going to be nervous about it. I'm going to be uncertain, but I have this strongly in my mind, this sense that, okay, I accomplished something really hard. So this is just something new. It's hard, but I just need to learn and work hard at it, and I can do it. And then pretty soon you have 5 or 6 things under your belt. Mm-hmm. And you know how that I'm sure the exact same things happen to you.
Yeah. And that's, I love that you went there, because that all it takes is that like one win, even if it's a small one. And then the next one gets easier and easier and easier. Right. So like building a business, right? The first time you have to go through, oh crap, we're out of cash and we're going to be out of business in 2 weeks if we don't figure this out. And you figure out a way to get through that, right? By inserting cash in the business if you got some, or calling all your accounts receivable saying, hey, can you let us pay later? Or calling your clients to accelerate some payments and stuff to get through that stuff, especially in like a startup phase. Once you've done that once, it's not as big of a deal the next time. And so on and so on. If it comes up, right, it gets easier to handle, and you don't, it doesn't have the seriousness that it did before. I mean, it's still serious, but it doesn't derail you. It's just like, okay, and I've said this before with business, is that the more problems that you can solve, the bigger the business you can have. Because realistically, the path of growing a business is solving bigger and bigger problems. And if you can do that well, then it can, grow and scale infinitely. All right. So Jothy, you talk about grit as a secret weapon for entrepreneurs, right? So define grit for us. Talk to us about how to build that habit into our lives as entrepreneurs.
There's maybe a few synonyms for grit: gumption, tenacity, resilience. And grit doesn't just apply to entrepreneurs. Grit applies to anybody that pushes self in an extreme sport. And I think everyone that I've known who's has had a disability has to develop grit, which is everything we've just been talking about. It's ability to work hard. It's setting goals and achieving them and celebrating them and moving on and bigger goals. And so I think that startup people either naturally already have it when they say, I'm going to go start a business, or they develop it quickly as they learn. And like you just said, first one, you make some mistakes. You actually, I shouldn't say that. You make mistakes on all 9 in my case, but you make different mistakes.
Different, right? Yeah.
Right. Hopefully they're not the fatal ones that you make again. But it's so grit is what enables you to keep at it. And I probably should have added persistence to that list of synonyms for grit as well. Or maybe they're just all components of grit. But the ability to what was it they used to say about the Energizer Bunny? Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Yeah. It's that, and this most recent startup is the one that went through the pandemic, and that was just, honestly, that was hell, and just coming back at it every day, and and having and learning the meaning of cold sweats at night, because you're worrying about you're keeping your team, and
Right.
that you're the source of their support for their family. So yeah, lots of grit was being developed there.
Well, and I can again emphasize, because my largest company that I built before we sold it post pandemic was in the travel space. So, and one day, like one day you're chugging along and we're the business intelligence side and the data side, but one day things are fine, and the next day everything's turned off. Like literally from a 100 to 0, like in the matter of a day, right? Because travel was cut off like overnight, and so like we made it through. We figured it out. In fact, we actually grew the most we ever did, because we doubled down on marketing and client acquisition with some really, really great offers and things that we did, because we saw the opportunity to take over the market share while everybody was pulling back. Everybody was like, turtle in the shell and everything. We went full bore, and that's ultimately, I think, what got the company bought. But I remember those first few weeks to a month of just like, what are we going to do? Because we had all these clients that overnight were like, well, we went from 100 to 0. We're not even using the products as much. What can you do? Or we may have to cancel, or, so it was a wild time, and it was literally find a way, make a way, find a way, make a way, find a way, make a way, figure it out. And just each day had a set of challenges to get through. And that's probably one of the best experiences of my life from a business standpoint, getting through that. And I bet you can agree with yours going through that. I think coming out of it, there's nothing that surprises me or really gets me worked up anymore in a business when it happens at this point,
My investors said that they decided that I had this really big hat because I kept finding another rabbit in the hat, and and the timing was absolutely. I mean, it's just is similar to yours. I was just starting to raise my Series A, and I probably started in January, and then it was March 11th when we got shut down, and had to go home. Nobody's in the office, and every investor said, "Nope, I'm protecting my existing portfolio. No new investments. Probably not for at least a year." And
ironically, just quick ADD moment on that. So March 11th. So I was actually in Lake Tahoe skiing when this happened, and I actually tore my MCL on Saturday on my finishing run. And that night, it was like a multiple whammy. That night, they got like 6 feet of snow dump. And the next morning, all the ski resorts were closed. And I was there with a bum knee. And I had like 6 feet of snow on top of the rental car that I was trying to clean off. And I had to make it back to the airport. And then I had to change flights and everything else to try to get home. It was crazy. So, skiing is involved in that and stuff. But had a great time at Palisades in Tahoe before that all went down. So,
wow,
sorry.
That's amazing. No, we were here, and we were just in Boston, and we've never gone back to that office. I mean, it was just we became 100% remote. But I mean, we got 2 rounds of PPP money. I was getting angel investors who said, "Yeah, we think this is a good opportunity." My brother and I loaned the company. I mean, we just did everything to just barely keep it going. And then we came out the other end, and it's going well again. We probably lost, we probably would have been way up here on the curve, 2 years earlier, but We're still at
But
it.
still, even making it through was that there are so many businesses for no fault of their own that just, they got torpedoed and couldn't make it through there. So, to make it for
Absolutely.
anybody was a challenge, and kudos to those that did. So 9 startups, multiple $100 million exits. What are your most important lessons for entrepreneurs to thrive in their business?
Well, there's this, there's a statistic we all know, which is 8 out of 10 startups fail, right? It's, and that's daunting. And I have distilled it down to, I think that there's, like five things that you have to get right in the first year and a half in order to not be the bad side of that statistic. And the positive way to say it is that if you get these 5 things done, then you're going to be the other side of the statistic. You're going to be one of the 8 out of 10 that really does succeed. And can I list those 5 things?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, so let me say this. I'm mostly familiar with tech startups. I've only done one, that TV production company that wasn't a tech startup. So given that, that's my caveat. Who is the CEO? It's funny because sometimes people think, oh, the CEO should be the sales and marketing guy. Well, actually, no. In the beginning, even if it's someone who would not be qualified to be CEO, maybe 2 years in, the person that has the passion, that has the vision, that understands what is the huge problem we're solving in the marketplace. You need the person who has the idea that's going to change the world, be the CEO to start off with. Then there's product market fit. Here's a strong statement I'm going to make. No company has ever succeeded that didn't figure out product market fit.
Right.
And it's not easy. You got to figure out what's the market. Is our vision matching what people in that market think? And then unless you are very well off and you're self-funded, then you're going to have to raise money from somebody, and you're going to have to figure out how to raise money. And that's not easy either. These are all hard things. And then the next one is, well, you also have to manage cash. I mean, you mentioned cash, having to do some funny things to make sure you have enough cash. But most companies, the dominant thing, if you're not a big manufacturing company or a pharmaceutical, then chances are the biggest expense item is going to be people, your staff. And you don't want to have to lay people off just because you're running out of cash. And so you got to understand at all times, where am I in my cash, and how long is my runway? And is it going to get me to the point where I've proven product market fit and I have some customers that are ready to buy, and I can show that to the next round of investors. And then the last one is culture. And it's people say, well, is it as important as those other things? It is, because culture isn't about, oh, it's a fun place to work, or, oh, gosh, we do this pizza thing every Friday afternoon. Culture is about attracting and retaining the best people. And so you have to start really early on culture, because it becomes embodied in all the people that are there. And as it grows, the company grows, it's embodied in more and more people, and you can't change it later. So those are the 5 things. I think you got to get those 5 things.
There's a couple things from that, obviously. I mean, culture to me it's buy-in. It's the buy-in of those that are, working in the business to something that is something bigger, and they have that ability to help shape something bigger, and they understand that the challenges that you go through, whatever it is, you guys are going to go through it together, and they have an unwavering belief in that. And, they're with you for the ride. Right. And that's one of the reasons, like, I've always been really honest and transparent with our teams, like in our different businesses. Like, hey guys, we're going to be short $20,000 in cash this month. That's our status as of right now. How can we make a dent in that? Right. We may not be able to make it all, but that's our challenge. How do we make it happen? Right. How do we get either over it or close to it? So we don't have to use so much out of savings. Right. Like to see a team rally around that and say, we're going to do everything we can to reach that number, because we're not going to let us, not have a profitable month or that sort of thing. Like, to me, that shows a great culture. Right. And then you mentioned about cash, and we've talked about this before, but I think it's a very important distinction that sales is not cash. I've seen so many businesses that, have great sales, but their cash flow is terrible. They can't collect it. And so they can't pay their bills, because ultimately cash is what pays the bills. Right. So I think, cash flow is the king of what you need to watch and manage. And I really appreciate you saying that, because a lot of people are just after the sale and they're not watching cash flow. And that's what bites them. Right. And that's why a lot of those startups go out of business, because they spend because they're selling, but they're not watching cash flow, and they run out of money really fast.
I've had board members that would test me, and they would say, "What's your cash? What's your cash on hand today?" And literally they expected me, and I began to understand that and appreciate that, to know what is your cash, and at your current burn rate. So you got to know burn rate as well. Mm-hmm. How many months of runway do you have? That's, and so you have to, as the CEO, you have to walk around with that information in your back pocket at all times. And they're right to emphasize that more than anything else, because startups always fail because they've run out of cash. Yep. And then what we just talked about, the 5 things I talked about, are things that help make sure you are, in a position to bring in that cash. But you ultimately, you do have this issue of, you can have lots of sales and they're not supposed to pay you yet because you gave them net 30, and you could still, you could
it's also different. It is different in the sense that every business that I've built has been built out of cash flow. I've never taken money. So when you take money, it's I think it's a different dynamic. At least talking with a lot of founders and on the show and stuff about getting a Series A and what happens then, right? And I think, there is kind of a different approach to if you're building out a cash flow versus if you are taking that injection of capital and stuff. And that'll dictate kind of how you run things and what you do. But still, you still got to watch that cash burn either way. I think you'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. My last question surrounds your new book, Think Like a Tech Founder. And you've covered obviously some of the 5 things you just said, but I got to imagine there are keys and principles addition to those that you feel are very important to build a great business. And I'm curious as to maybe what some of those things are from the book that you share, some of that wisdom gained over 35 years.
So each of the quote chapters is actually, I call an anecdote. There's 31 of them, and they're it's almost like you took, the way I wrote my memoir about sort of dealing with everything that happened to me, and plopped it down in this other world, my startup career world, and I'm telling stories about, good things and bad things that happened on the way to trying to help people sort of benefit from my learning and save them the trouble. It's like giving back, And so, for example, I have a chapter called "Investors Are Not Your Friend." Again, I'm going to be talking about things you didn't need, but in the way you started companies. But many of mine were had a fairly high capital need right up front. And so I needed to raise, money. So the idea of investors are not your friend. Well, it was related to the fact that what I said earlier about, well, who's the CEO? And I didn't know what I know then, what I know now, which is you might need that tech person who has the vision to be the CEO. And I had imposter syndrome. And so I didn't want to be a CEO until I had more sales and marketing experience, because I came out of a technical background. I got a PhD in computer science. So I said no. And then I went back to the investors that I, used to raise money for that first startup. And I said, I want to learn how to be CEO. And I asked them if they had a portfolio company where they had a CEO who was fantastic overall, but especially in areas that I felt weak in, that I could learn from. And then when the guy, this really great investor, I thought he was just awesome, really friendly. We were being friendly, that's for sure. But we weren't friends, I found out. And he said, well, there's this company A and company B, and they're both in my portfolio, and I think you should interview at both. I do, and I come back and I said, oh, they both seem great. I like the CEOs. Which one is the right one? And he said, oh, it's B. And what it turns out was that company A took off like a rocket ship, and company B was struggling, and it needed help. And he was answering the question, which one should I go to? For him, it was better for him, right, not for me. and so that's sort of the lesson of that anecdote. And they're relatively short, that says, don't assume just because these people are really nice people that are really friendly, they are not your friend. They're going to look out for them first, and not going to give you advice that's like good for you and your career.
Okay, it's time for Jothy's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that he wants you to take that you can put into your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you're going to leave this earth tomorrow and you could only leave behind your 3 best pieces of wisdom to the generations that come after you to help them live their best life, what would those 3 things be? So, Jothy, what are your Misfit 3?
Okay, so of course, it's fair if there are things we've already talked about, right?
That's all right.
Okay, so not saying and thinking can't would be one of them. Another is to never be arrogant. Arrogance is a very strong negative force. In fact, it's more than being humble. It's almost being just a tiny bit insecure, because don't worry, you can overcome that insecurity by the third thing, which is strive for exceptionalism, by setting modest goals, working really hard at them, and then massively celebrating a success, and then moving on to the next. So it's this sort of 3 things. Don't say can't. Don't be arrogant. Be a little tiny bit, at least modest, if not a little insecure, and strive for exceptionalism.
I love that, especially the last one, the way you frame it too. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
JothyRosenberg.com.
Perfect. We'll link to all that in the show notes, the best show notes in the business, for reasons I will talk about more here in a second. But first, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneur, this is your first episode with us. Welcome. It is such an honor to have you with us, and I hope you become a regular listener and subscriber. And for all of you that are with us week in and week out, I cannot thank you enough for your support of the show. You are what makes this go in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure and go out and check out the show notes for this episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself myself as part of my personal growth routine. I actually go back through these episodes every single week, and I take my best pieces of wisdom and tips and habits and things that I gleaned from people like Jothy, and then I share them with you. So go out and check that out. And then go out and give this episode a rating and review. Like and comment on it. Help share Jothy's message, because we all know, and I say this in every episode, one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that Jothy shared today, a concept that he shared, a principle that he shared was that missing link you were looking for to get to your next level. So share this with others. And again, Jothy, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all your wisdom and insight today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a complete delight.